Welcome to Sold with Webinars, a podcast that aims to uncover how the most successful experts, coaches, consultants, and e-course professionals sell their products and services with just one sales presentation or webinar. A simple sales webinar can transform the business and life of a solopreneur. And this podcast will show you how other experts just like you are generating 6 and 7 figures per year online with their webinars. So let's get started. Hey there, Joel Irway here, and thanks so much for tuning into our show today. I'm really excited about having today's guest on the show, Travis Stephenson. And we had so much information on this interview that we had to break it up into 2 parts because Travis was sharing so much knowledge about what he was doing with live webinars, what he was doing with auto webinars. And so what you're going to be listening to today is part 1 of our 2-part interview with Travis Stephenson. Now, on part 1, we're going to be discussing how he is using automated webinars with his software, InterOptin, to generate leads and generate sales. And so I want you to focus in on this interview because he gives you a lot of great strategies for how you can use webinars to sell software products. And he has a lot of great insider knowledge about different strategies to use for auto webinars. So without spoiling it, let's go ahead and jump right into part 1 of our interview. So I've got a very special guest on today, Travis Stephenson, who has been just crushing it with webinars. And I want to do a brief introduction on how we came to connect. We're in a similar Facebook group together with a mutual friend. And Travis dropped some huge value bombs in the Facebook group about a recent webinar that he was doing. And so I read it, and he was doing automated webinars. And whenever somebody does automated webinars, it immediately piques my interest because it's like the hottest thing right now. And so I asked him if he would hop on and spend a couple of minutes with us and just kind of share with us what his experience has been with automated webinars, and specifically how he's using them to drastically grow his businesses, his software businesses, and everything else that he's working on. So before I spoil any of the goodies when he jumps in and talks about what he's working on, Travis, welcome to the show, man. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Yeah. So before we hopped on this podcast, I was just kind of asking Travis a couple of questions, and I want to have Travis give his own personal introduction, just a quick, 30 to 45 second introduction on kind of how he started as an entrepreneur, how he came about discovering webinars, and what he's doing right now, and then we'll dive deep into what he's doing with automated webinars. So Travis, can you fill us in with your background? Yeah, sure. So I did the normal college route like most people do, and I graduated, took a sales job. The sales job was this is actually funny because I took a sales job and I never sold anything that this guy was wanting me to sell. Like I literally sold 0, and it was a $50 a month product. And got so depressed and got headaches and went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, "You need to quit your job because it's that bad for you." I was like, all right, took a job. I long story short, 4 months later, after trying to play poker professionally, which did not pay off, I took a job interview for a personal assistant, which, I mean, if you go to college, you don't want to get $70,000 in debt to go become a $14 an hour personal assistant. And the guy was like, look, man, you got charisma, you're young. I want to teach you some other stuff. And just so happened that the company was owned by Sean Casey, one of the old godfathers of internet marketing. And so I was kind of thrown into CPA marketing and lead gen and email marketing. And I was actually an affiliate manager right off the bat. So I started learning the game from other affiliates, that kind of thing. And then, just realized oh man, I could do this for myself instead of doing it for other people. And then, over the course of a couple of years, it's been 9 years now, I just realized a couple of things about myself. And I think you kind of have to internally audit yourself over time. But I realized that setting up sales pages is not something that I like doing. It's writing out sales copy and doing that's not me. Because it's too one-sided. It's like you have to hope that the visitor, you're engaging the visitor enough. And it's just that's me. It lacks a little bit of personality. It lacks the true value of whatever you might be selling if you're selling something that does have value. And so, webinars have obviously been around for a long time. And
I've had GoToWebinar now for like 7 years. Been using the same GoToWebinar account forever. $99 for 1,000 attendees, grandfathered in. Not letting go of that
Lucky
bad.
you.
Letting go of that bad boy. I think it's $600 now a month, which is crazy. But and
Yeah.
I'd still pay that. But yeah. So then I started doing them. And actually, I got into doing my first webinar in 2011. I did a launch with Jamie Lewis, actually, called Income Entourage, where we built this cool little lead gen software. And it went huge. We did like 12,000 front end sales in 7 days. It was massive. And we were one of the first people to do all of our training inside of the members area live on the first day, second day, third day, whatever. Instead of doing training videos where like nobody can ask questions. So I started seeing that. And I'm like, man, we really have an opportunity with these live, having people on kind of sessions. And from there, started looking into doing more sales presentations via webinars. And it wasn't until like about a year and a half ago that I really, 2017. So yeah, about a year and a half ago that I really started like applying my, what I think would be webinar skills to doing it on a mass scale basis. And from there, yeah, I just, it came a lot more natural to me. And I think, I'll get into the story about my latest webinar, about how I literally just sat down for an hour, wrote out all the individual slides. I never edited them. I never proofread them. I just went through and did it and had my designer make a design of them. And since then we've done like 115,000 in sales on 3 webinars. So it's one of those things where I think a lot of times people overthink it, but you don't necessarily have to.
So you've definitely tested out live webinars. You've tested out automated webinars. And we were talking about your new software called, let me make sure I get this right, InterOptin. Is that correct?
So yeah, my 2 big softwares right now. One is InterOptin. That's on the tail end of its lifespan, I think. And then my newest one is Chatmatic, which is a Facebook marketing tool.
Awesome. So what's the and you're selling these via automated webinars, correct?
Yeah, I do both automated and live. Look, there's no substitute for live webinars, especially when it comes to dollar per attendee values. There's just zero substitute for getting somebody on a live call. And I mean, look, I spiel this all the time. I think this is one of the biggest things moving into 2017, 2018 that people need to pay attention to, especially entrepreneurs who are trying to grow their business, is paying attention to the individual person as opposed to treating them like thousands of other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that auto webinars, while they're phenomenal and I love them, it's so one-sided again. You're never actually calling the person's name out. You're never like saying, yes, answering that individual question. You're never reading the actual question verbatim out loud so the customer now knows that you're engaging with them. I can tell you for a fact, looking at the metrics, when I'm on a webinar live and I actually say somebody's name, and this is a cool statistic, they're 900% more likely to purchase than somebody's name who I don't read, which is really crazy because like what I do is I make sure on my webinars, and this is a cool tip, is I am like the engagement king. Some guys get on my webinars and they're like other marketers, they'll get on and they'll be like, dude, you spend the entire time saying like, say yes or say me or say awesome. And it's like, yeah, because if you're in a face-to-face conversation with somebody and they never give you any feedback, how do you know that they're listening, paying attention, understanding? So it's like when you're on a webinar with 500 people, if nobody's talking, how do you know they're listening, paying attention, understanding what you're actually saying? So I always do that. And so what I'll do is when I say like, say yes, now that's another cool trick is always get them to say yes so that they're used to saying yes throughout the course of the webinar.
Mm-hmm.
But I get them to say yes. And when I get people to say yes, the yeses start streaming in. I make sure to take a moment and be like, John, Julie, Susie, Brad, Jacob. I go through and I'm like, everybody's saying yes. And those people whose names you actually can utter out are and we've done the numbers, 900% more likely to actually purchase because, again, it now goes from you're not one of 1,000, you're one of one.
Mm-hmm.
People like that. Like,
yeah, man.
I mean, it's a big deal. So yes, automated webinars, I freaking love them. And so what I do is we run them to a live webinar sign up once a week. I do an encore the next day, and then it's all automated from there. So whenever anybody asks me for replays, it goes to an EverWebinar replay. I did have a lot of really good success with my InterOptin webinar straight to an auto webinar.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want, right here in front of me, actually, I have some really cool stats that I think would help a lot of people if they're looking at doing auto webinars.
Definitely.
We tested a bunch of different times. And here's what we found. So our just-in-time webinar, I actually made a post about this as well recently, but our just-in-time webinar did 10 sales during this 1 week that we tried it at $9,370. We had 3 sales on the replay of somebody who signed up for the just-in-time. So we had every single opt-in who opted in for the just-in-time webinar was worth $30.66 to us. So, if you do the math there, if you're paying anything less than $10 for that lead, you're making 20 for every, I was paying 5.
Mm-hmm.
So my ROI was awesome. But 28% of the audience watched the entire webinar live when they signed up for the just-in-time. 13% of the audience watched if they watched the replay. And then 75% of all the people who opted in for the just-in-time session watched at least some part of the webinar, which is, you'll see in the rest of these stats, staggering compared to the other numbers.
How much was the offer for InterOptin here?
$997 or multi-pay, or we had the multi-pay $397 times 3.
So this was cold traffic straight to a just-in-time webinar. For those of you who don't know just-in-time is, a just-in-time means when you click on the landing page, the webinar is going to start within the next 15 minutes or 30 minutes. So it means it's happening like right now. So the goal there is to get your attendance rate as high as possible, because the psychology is if somebody clicks on an ad, they're interested in the webinar, and it's like, oh crap, I might as well sign up now because the next one's starting in a couple of minutes. So just to clarify what just-in-time means.
Yeah, and our performance on just-in-time, or when you're familiar with it, a lot of people call it JITs, JIT, JITs, just-in-time webinars. Our 3 p.m. session, we only did 3 sales, $3,000. Less than 40% of all the opt-ins watched the live session, which is ridiculous. So every opt-in was worth $10.87 if they opted into the 3 p.m. So do not, unless you're targeting an audience that's like real only entrepreneurs, in the middle of the day for them is like available. It doesn't make any sense. Our 7 p.m. session, every opt-in was worth $18.59. And our noon session, every opt-in was worth $10. So, overall, we're looking at it. We had, in a 10-day span, we had 1,117 registrations. We did $15,749 in sales live, $3,388 in sales on the replay. So overall, across the entire funnel, whether it was noon, 3, 7, or just in time, our average subscriber earnings were $17 per lead. So we were making $17 per lead on the replay itself. So to kind of give you a little bit of perspective on that, typically we'll make so last night, we're probably right around, give or take, $30 to $50 per lead on a live webinar. So that's what I mean when I say it's a give and take. Yes, you get a lot more of your time back. So if you're like, hey, my time is worth $100 an hour, I don't have to do 4 of these webinars every single week. I'm saving a lot of money doing that. That's, I don't knock it. It's just getting harder, I think, with Facebook to really make the auto webinars work. It's odd. I mean, again, we're going to continue to try it. And I love the idea of, constantly rolling people into these other webinars, these automated webinars, if they don't attend the live, or, if they opt in and you never hear from them again, trying to do a follow-up series to an automated. I think that's awesome. And I think moving forward in 2017, one of my big tests is going to be live. Like, we're going to set up an A/B split test and do a live versus an automated, same ad, everything cloned, and just see like, what's the value here? Like, is it worth it for me to never do another live webinar again and just pump automated, and kind of see how it goes? But, another big side of it is, one of the beautiful pieces of EverWebinar is their notifications. The emails they send out and all that. I took advantage of every piece of it. So we do an immediate email that goes out. We do a 1 hour before email that goes out. We do a 15 minutes before email that goes out. And we do a 15-minute text that goes out. And then we do it 2 hours after the webinar ends. We do a replay. Our numbers are phenomenal with these open rates, with the click rates. We tweaked around a little bit with the text message reminder, because one thing that I realized is when you send automated text messages, there's no phone number on it, obviously. So it comes from a random number. So you have to waste a little bit of your allowed text to remind them what they're getting the text about and making it comfortable, and then all that. So we do not send them a link to join the webinar in the text message. We tell them, go check your email.
Go check your email. Yeah.
You don't want them on the phone for that. So
awesome, man. So you just dropped a ton of value there, and I want to just do a quick recap and just make sure that I got this right. So for anybody who's listening on this podcast right now, I just want to quickly summarize it. So these stats that you just gave us, first of all, this was for the InterOptin webinar, the $997 offer. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a 10-day period from my InterOptin webinar.
Okay. So when was this? What was the time frame that you ran this? Was this recent, or was this back in the couple months?
It was in October, November.
Okay, awesome. So here's what I got from what you just dropped, and correct me if any of this is wrong. So average earnings per registrant, which is a very, very, very critical statistic that for webinar registrations, for webinar funnels, right? EPR, earnings per registrant. You have to be measuring this because this is going to tell you from top of funnel to the end of funnel, if you're profitable, right? So with a just-in-time, which was running every 15 minutes, you had $30.66 earnings per registrant, which is great. So average, like you're averaging a cost per lead of $5 or $10, bare minimum, you're making 3 times your money back right there. 3 p.m. was at $10, 7 p.m. was at $18, and 12 noon was at $10. So the average EPR across the entire funnel was $17 earnings per registrant. So what I'm gathering out of that was you did it live once, and then you pushed everybody after that to the replay. And
no, this one was all live right from the beginning.
Gotcha.
This was all automated right from the beginning. There was no in that funnel. There was no live session ever. It was a live recording that I did with a different group. I made it obviously very like it fit anybody. And then I uploaded that recording, and that's when I started this campaign. So none of that traffic ever saw an actual live webinar. They just saw one of my replay recordings.
Excellent. So good clarification there. So this was a completely 100% automated webinar from start to finish, and making on average $17 earnings per registrant, which is, I mean, that's good for an automated webinar. When we do our live webinars, for everybody who's listening right now, kind of our benchmark, we want to shoot for like $22 to $25 earnings per registrant, and that's kind of like the baseline. That's kind of like where we start. It's like if we're below that, then we got to look at our funnel. But that's kind of really where we shoot for. So awesome, man. That's incredible. Now I want to ask you a question real quick. Have you ever tested self-liquidating offers on the thank you page with the webinars? I've got some conflicting information with this, and since you've got so much experience with it, have you ever tested that in your funnels, meaning an offer right after they register for the webinar?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of it, especially from warm traffic. It's killer. I mean, you can definitely get it rolling from warm traffic. Cold traffic, little different. Obviously, they don't know you quite as well, so it depends on what the offer is. Mm-hmm. Now, it's also different because when you're selling high ticket, you're not going to get a lot of action on a self-liquidating high ticket offer on a thank you page. Like, they need to be sold. They got to actually be there, give it time to be sold. You can do low ticket. And so sometimes, like, I've tested around with the idea of, a self-liquidating offer on the thank you page where I offer a low monthly continuity version of what they're going to see when they go to the webinar. It does okay, but it doesn't nearly make as much money as what the actual webinar is going to do. So part of me, what I do is instead is I do a little bit of extra research on the thank you page. I give them sort of like promo material that's going to make them more excited to be there. I give them a couple more case studies. Typically, I'll give them a case study or two to download, show them some more statistics, things like that. But I try to avoid selling anything that's not the primary objective, because I don't want somebody getting on the call and being like, hey, I sat through your entire webinar, but I just bought it for $47 a month, and you're going to sell it for $997. It sort of contradicts itself. So I tried to avoid that. Now, I've heard a lot of people absolutely crushing it with that. I think that's really cool. But part of me feels like that's got to be a lot of these guys who are doing agency work, where you do like a webinar, and then the first webinar is like just to get applications, and then you do the actual like one-on-one follow-up. I could see it working there because you can get the one-on-one application fee out of the way without having them do the webinar. Something like that, where there's typically an additional step involved anyways. But for me, like especially auto webinars, man. Like, don't distract them from anything. If anything, you want them to like stay on the thank you page until the video starts. So,
and that's kind of where I was getting. I wanted to see if you had tested it, self-liquidating offers, and if it had actually taken away from, had detracted from the overall funnel sales performance. Because I've tested it once before with a live event, and so to let anybody know, to let you in on a little secret, this was an awful self-liquidating offer. Do not sell this. So I was selling a big live event I did with Russell Brunson about 2 years ago. And on my thank you page, so the big event was, hey, it was called the Webinar Success Super Summit. And on the thank you page, I sold copies of the recordings and cliff notes. So I basically sold people not to show up to my live webinar. So we sold a bunch. I mean, it was a good, front end moneymaker, but our attendance rate was very, very, very low. Yeah. So it's like, oh yeah, here's the recording. So don't show up live. It's like,
yeah, sometimes it's counterintuitive. Like, for me, like, and I've been using this expression a lot lately, which I think is a really cool expression, but or metaphor, I guess. But it's the difference between hunting and farming. And a lot of people talk about like, oh, I want that money right away, right? Like, oh, now I know my ads are going to break even because I'm making some of my money back right away. And to me, that's hunting. That's going after the food right now. You're going to, whatever. Farming is the long-term approach. It's kind of a little bit less sexy. It's boring, and you got to take some risk. And even this week, the last 2 weeks we've been running cold traffic to live webinars, and we make nothing for 7 days, and I'm spending I've spent $11,000 in the last 9 days on ads, and all of that money, none of it could have come into fruition until the day of the webinar. Mm-hmm. Like we weren't supposed to make any money with it. Now I did make money with it. It's actually a funny story because of my actual software that I'm selling. I actually use it in the ads, which helps me generate more revenue. But typically, I mean, I'm more of the farmer, not the hunter. And I think that a lot of people are overlooking that it needs to be done that way. Like I really, really believe it needs to be done that way. And your story is a perfect example of like, putting the immediate meal in front of the long-term eating for life kind of objective. So it's interesting that you had that experience.
Yeah, it was. It's kind of like the direct response world. We want to get the result now. We want to self-liquidate our ad costs now. And it's like if you just take a pause for a second, cultivate your relationship just a little bit, that relationship could be worth 2, 3, 4x whatever it is in a little bit longer. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to giving you the next one. You can also follow and watch the behind-the-scenes look at how I'm personally launching a brand new 6- and 7-figure product from scratch at soldwithwebinars.com/TV. And if you'd like to come hang out with other fellow experts, join our Facebook group at soldwithwebinars.com/experts. Join us next time, and I'll see you there.